Chapter 45, April 23rd, 1943, Warsaw Ghetto. I didn't sleep well that night. No one in the bunker did. Who could sleep when we were packed in so tight that only the most seriously injured could lie down? When unidentifiable noises clattered and knocked and banged near the bunker walls? When every thought was a question of what another day of fighting might bring? Before I was ready for an answer to that question, gunfire erupted below us. Night was over. The fires must be spreading, someone observed. That was obvious. Smoke had wafted into the bunker overnight, stinging my throat until I finally allowed myself a small sip of water from our dwindling supplies. It did nothing for my hoarseness or dryness. Nothing for my hope. We prepared for another day against the Germans, more exhausted than when we'd fallen asleep, and nibbled on some rusk bread, which was probably all we'd get today. No one looked directly at anyone else. Few words were spoken, until Esther pulled a belt buckle from her shoulder bag and held it out. When we were gathering weapons from the wounded Germans, I took this. What do these words mean? It was a gold buckle with an eagle standing on top of the Nazi swastika. Arched over the image were the words, Gott mit uns. I closed my eyes and drew in a deep breath, almost unable to answer. It means God with us. For her to bring that up, today of all days, was stunning. As we celebrated Passover this week, the Christians were preparing for Easter. As part of that, today was their Good Friday, a day that was supposed to be dedicated to seeking forgiveness from God. How could their soldiers commit such atrocities on this day, all while wearing an emblem that suggested God supported their actions? This morning our radio was tuned to a feed that connected us to the Polish underground. The latest news was announced by the Polish woman in Warsaw, whose voice we'd often heard before. Whoever she was, she'd become a vital bridge between resistance groups, broadcasting information from one group to another. I imagined how eagerly the Germans were searching for her. Information was power, and she'd become a source for both. She said, "Members of the Polish underground, citizens of Warsaw and surrounding areas, all those who yearn to be free. Surely you have noticed the Jewish quarter here is under attack by the invaders. Their resistance leaders have issued a plea for help. They need weapons and ammunition. They need people who will fight, both from inside and outside the walls. They need your help, not for their own sake, but for the freedom of Warsaw, the freedom of Poland. Please help." Yitzhak snorted. "What help? Many of the weapons we bought from the underground are defective. They jam, or worse, they backfire. They took our money and gave us weapons they cannot use anyway." I cursed again and didn't care if Esther heard it. Maybe the underground didn't know. Maybe their own weapons were just as bad. But maybe they knew exactly what they were selling. They wanted our money and cared nothing for our lives. "We can't expect help from outside the ghetto," Yitzhak said, "and if we do get any, it will be too little, too late." I agreed, though by the time we returned to the street, my mind snapped to another day's fighting already underway. The pink-colored cloud suggested that anywhere else in Warsaw, a beautiful spring morning was rising, the hazy sunrise fueled by the fires still burning within these walls. And here, among ashes and debris, and the growing scars of our battles, we saw far too many fallen resistance fighters. A few of them, people I considered friends, people I'd laughed with only a few days ago as we pledged our lives and our honor to one another. They held to their pledge, and probably very soon I would have to do the same. It had been a terrible night for the ghetto, and today promised to be worse. Without the advantage of nearby buildings in which to hide, we were forced to attack from half-exposed positions, behind still burning walls, in open ditches, and always at greater distances than we wanted. We're stationed too far away to be effective, Yitzhak said, but if we get closer, we'll be shot. He thought about that a moment. I'm going in closer. Don't go! I wanted to make Yitzhak obey me, just as I used to make him do chores or clean up his messes. But I saw the determination in his eyes, the desire to stand tall, the same glimmer of strength I used to see in my father's eyes. Perhaps Yitzhak was meant to finish the fight my father never started, to honor our parents and all they had taught us in our early years, long before they knew where fate would lead us. As hard as it was to say, be safe, I did, and then turned my attention back to the battle, whispering under my breath, find me again soon. While he ran one way, Esther helped me limp down the street until we found a half-standing building with a hole torn through the wall. It wouldn't take something more than a machine gun to blast through these thick layers of brick, wood, and plaster. Something monstrous. Maybe it accounted for the explosion I heard yesterday. A small group of Germans ran down the street, unaware of our presence. I injured one with my gun, less than I'd wanted for the sacrifice of a bullet. Esther and I ducked low, while several rounds were returned in our direction, but most of the Germans only scurried away. Once they'd gone, another small group of fighters passed through the room where we were hiding. Did you hear? A woman asked. Fighting has begun from outside the ghetto. It's happening. A new surge of hope swelled within me. Could the people of Warsaw truly be responding to that plea for help that we heard on the radio? This was what we'd wanted all along, to spark a movement beyond these walls. There aren't many, one man said, but if it's even one or two, it's a start. A woman dressed in German armor ducked her head into our room. My first instinct to aim at her was calmed as soon as I recognized her as Tamir's friend Rachel, whom I hadn't seen since the fighting began. As angry as I had been with her for trying to send Esther away, I was glad to see her now. I admired her expression of focus and determination, and tried to mirror it when she looked at me. She said, "We need your help down in the tunnels. A fresh supply of weapons has come in from the Polish underground." Esther and I followed her out, though I wasn't expecting to see much. Were they the same high-quality toys we'd already paid such dear money for? Weapons that jammed and misfired? If they delivered the weapons, they should have stayed here with us to use them, I said. She smiled back at me. The delivery came through the Catholic convent near the ghetto. The church allowed us to dig a tunnel into their catacombs, which we've used to evacuate many of our children already. The nuns delivered these weapons, though I dare say we won't ask them to stay and fight. Despite our grim situation, I found myself smiling too, reminded that there were good and bad people everywhere. The more I embraced those who were good, the more I hoped to dispel the evil from my life. Whenever possible, Rachel avoided the streets, leading us through buildings when possible, and through back alleys when necessary. About halfway there, we stepped into an alley, and a German shouted at us and fired a shot. It grazed my shoulder, but I returned fire until he fell. Seconds later, Rachel had collected his gun and pack of ammunition. Since my gun had just been emptied, Rachel gave me everything she'd found. We reached the tunnel beneath the square, and indeed a small pile of weapons and ammunition awaited us, as well as some fresh bottles of water and a little dried meat. We've got to take all of it out in one load, Rachel instructed. We can't risk another trip back here. There's too much, I said. Even if we divided the load into thirds, we can't carry our share. But Esther stepped forward with a white tablecloth that must have decorated someone's Passover table a few days ago. Today is the Sabbath. Would it be wrong to use this? I'm sure it is, I said, then reached for the tablecloth, but it's a good solution. We laid out the cloth and piled everything on top of it. Then Rachel took 2 corners, and Esther and I each took one to lift the weapons. It was still heavy, but together we were managing. The problem was the thickening air around us. Smoke. The flamethrowers, I said. The building above us is on fire, which meant there were Germans at the exits to shoot us as we left. If we left. I was already coughing from the smoke, and my eyes were stinging like needles had been poked into them. We can load these weapons, Esther said. Shoot them before they get us. Rachel shook her head. There will be more of them than us. And if we die here, then we lose this entire cachet. Listen carefully. Go back to the tunnels and stay there until it's safe to come out. You must get these weapons into the hands of our fighters. What about you? I asked. We've stashed other supplies on the upper floors. I'll collect what I can. No, I didn't want her to go. The fire is burning fast. I can't waste time here. Obey your orders. She waved us away, back into the tunnels. I hoisted my half of the tablecloth higher over my shoulder, determined to bear more of the weight than Esther. When I turned around again to look for Rachel, she'd already disappeared into the smoke. It would be the last time I saw her alive.